This is big breaking news. A top U.S. general and chief of operations for the United States Space Force has issued a urgent warning to the American people and to Congress. He is warning that critical things in our everyday life could be knocked out. Things like GPS, things like our farming, things like our logistic network and our supply chain could be affected from this event. So let's get into all the details here really quick, guys. Please just hit that like and hit that subscribe. I'm posting multiple videos every single day, keeping you guys updated on this big news, and it just helps to get these alerts out. I appreciate that. So this is what's happening. We had this warning issued by General Saltzman. All right, he is the chief of operations for U.S. Space Force. He's been in the military for 35 years, and he is warning that our U.S. satellites could be hit and could be taken out and are at risk. He's also warning that there's things like directed energy weapons right now on satellites in space that are floating above our heads every single day. He's warning that these weapon systems are being readied and being put in space, and they're over the US already operating, and they could operate in the future, and maybe they've even done stuff already. So let's listen to what he said. He had this congressional hearing where he was telling Congress and these commissioners exactly what's going on in space and these threats that are happening. I want you to listen to what he's saying, and then we will talk more about it really quick. And this stuff affects everything, all right? Satellites are for GPS, all the trucks, the farm equipment, all right? All the big ag combines move and operate on GPS, okay? That's how they plant the corn so tight and perfectly along the edges, is because it's all GPS. And if these things go out, we could see a breakdown of a lot of these systems that depend on satellites, right? A third of all of our commerce in the US depends on satellite communication, right? Even this video right here depends on satellite internet to be uploaded, all right? So if this did happen, we might not have these videos, right? We might not be able to upload. So I want you to listen to what he said here, and then we will talk more about it. There's a few different clips that I want to play from him, but listen to this first one really quick.
Intelligence information, whether we're surveilling the Earth to look for missile launches and the data that we provide, the ability to use satellites to our advantage is the reason we really want to be in space. It's to take advantage of it. And there's economic reasons with communications, et cetera. And so what war looks like is using weapons to deny an adversary access to those capabilities. So the PRC has built systems that can actually deny us the ability to use our satellites the way we want to. And so what I also describe is 6 basic categories of space weapons. And they're really divided into 2 parts. There's ground-based weapons and space-based weapons. And each of those areas has the same 3 kinds of weapons. There's directed energy, there's RF, like jammers, and then there's kinetic. And that's 2 things run together to create some sort of explosion, some sort of destructive force. So kinetic weapons, directed energy weapons, and RF jammers. Those can be on orbit, those can be on the ground, pointed up. The PRC is investing heavily in all 6 categories. Right now, we are not investing in all 6 categories. We're resource limited, and we're trying to figure out which ones we could get the most utility out of early on. The reason you need all 6 categories is because they're all not best suited for all targets that you might try to hold at risk. And so we start to balance, are we trying to counter a low Earth orbit capability? Are we looking at a geosynchronous capability? Those would require different kinds of weapons. And are we trying to deny, disrupt, degrade, or God forbid, destroy? What is the end effect that's really necessary?
All right, so there's 2 other clips I want to play from him too. But if you heard that, he said there's directed energy weapons on these satellites. He said there's also ground-based ones as well too. he said that there is radio frequency jamming weapons and also just kinetic weapons as well too. He was talking about how there's satellite grabbers that have been developed where it's essentially a very high altitude plane slash drone that has a giant grabber arm on it and can grab satellites and deorbit them and cause chaos, right? And one of the main problems with this is that once these satellites get deorbited or they are destroyed, they break apart in the atmosphere, okay? And they take up entire sections of the atmosphere that become debris fields and become unoperable, all right? So that's also a major issue too. And a lot of this stuff is magnetic metals, right? So this could also affect the Earth's magnetosphere, right? That's a whole nother topic. But directed energy weapons, think about all these fires we've seen, all this weird stuff. I'm not saying it was caused by this, but to hear it from one of the head chiefs of Space Force, chief of operations for Space Force, saying, hey, there are directed energy weapons on these satellites. And there's been weird videos of even satellites passing over these fires, like in Hawaii last year. There was a very strange video of this satellite passing over the fires there and shooting like these green lasers, right? It was a video that went around last year. I'm not saying that's what's going on, but he's saying these technologies do exist. There's also things like EMPs, electromagnetic pulses, that could be loaded onto these satellites and detonated over the United States, right? And there's been congressional hearings on EMPs. If one was detonated over St. Louis and it was powerful enough and the right altitude, most likely a low orbital satellite, then it could, not super low, but not too high either. If it was detonated over St. Louis, it could wipe out 90% of the US population within 1 year because it would cause all of our systems to go offline, right? That's the most extreme circumstance and scenario, right? And probably the most least likely scenario. But these weapon systems are in space, they are floating over our head, and we don't know what exactly they're doing, right? You think that you're safe because they're way up there, but they're able to see things on the ground, communicate with things on the ground, and also target things on the ground, all right? Listen to this really quick too. He's talking about how there's been a, quote, kill net developed of these satellites where they have a, quote, kill net where they can use hundreds of satellites to target certain targets, certain satellites, certain targets on the ground, right? Or in space or in the air, right? He's saying that China has developed this, quote, kill net where they can direct hundreds of satellites at once, firing whatever it is, directed energy weapons at a specific target and essentially destroy it or immobilize it, right? Make it not work anymore. Destroy the electronic systems inside of it. Listen to this really quick about this killnet, quote, killnet system that is also just right over our heads right now, right? Every day. It's one of these things you can't live in fear of it, but you should be aware, right? You need to know what's going on and you should be prepared. You should have stockpiles of food, water, gas, things like that, just in case you ever need it. And even if it's just for a storm, right? You have these things. And this is like the most extreme scenario, but it could happen, right? So just be prepared. Listen to this really quick. He's talking about this, quote, kill net of satellites that can target any target with directed energy weapons.
Going and developing its capabilities. The United States continues on the trajectory that we're going in developing our space capabilities. How do you see that playing out? Yeah, I don't like the curves that you've just kind of defined there. I don't like the slope of those curves. I think if in the last few years, one of the big changes that I think is noteworthy is we recognized in 2007 and in the following years after that they were investing heavily in the counter space capabilities to deny us the use of our satellites. The bigger change in the last 10 years, I think, is now they've built this, what we called a kill web. But in essence, it's a space-enabled targeting set of constellations. The ability to find, fix, track, target our terrestrial forces, that's what has grown most impressively over the last decades. Hundreds of satellites used for this purpose. So that means it's no longer, it's still necessary to protect our satellites, but that's not sufficient. Now we have to be able to deny the PRC, for example, the use of their satellites against our forces. That's a new mission set, and really rounds out what we say it means to have space superiority, to use space control, protect ours, but also deny theirs. And that's what we're trying to invest more in.
General, thank you for your testimony today. It's been very, very helpful.
All right, so you heard that there, him confirming this kill web or kill net. He might have said kill web, and I might have been saying kill net. But same concept here, right? And so does this mean that these space lasers are real, right? I'm not saying that they are. I'm not saying that anything specifically tied to it, but we've seen like a lot of, debunking and stuff like that around this topic, saying, hey, this isn't true, this isn't real, there's no such thing as space lasers. And now we have the chief of operations of Space Force, General Saltzman, saying that there are directed energy weapons and, quote, kill webs of hundreds of satellites that form constellations to target our on-the-ground forces, all right? He said our terrestrial forces on the ground are being targeted by these satellites, all right? They're being watched, surveilled, and they could potentially in the future be taken out, right? And maybe these things are already happening right now, because think about it. If something like this was happening, if this was maybe related to some type of fire or some type of events in the United States, it would be very hard for the U.S. to directly come out and admit something like this, right? Because it's a major breach of security, and it would cause panic. People would be like, okay, there's satellites over our heads that have directed energy weapons, and they could potentially target us. Like, what are you going to do about this, right? People would want accountability. People would freak out. And the government, that's like one of their main things, just overall, every government, is to prevent people from freaking out, right? Sometimes they want people to freak out if they want a certain reaction. But that's one of their main jobs, is downplaying things and kind of sweeping things under the rug to keep a sense of normalcy, right? That's almost every government's job. Not saying that's good or bad. I'm just saying that's the reality here, is that they do sweep a lot of things under the rug. They don't always tell the truth about what exactly is going on. So if something like this did happen, we couldn't have the full faith of the government to really say, hey, this is what happened, right? Even if they know, it would cause all types of chaos, right, and panic. And we see these tensions rising between the U.S. and China right now, too, with this tariff war. The U.S. put over 30% tariff, I believe, 36% tariffs, and that was on top of a previous tariff already. So some goods are experiencing a 56% tariff. China, goods being imported into the U.S., and China implemented reciprocal tariffs on U.S. goods just today as well, too, right? So tensions are escalating. China does want to take Taiwan, and one of their big cards that they might be willing to play, especially since it wouldn't really, it wouldn't cause casualties directly. It would indirectly in the long term. It would cause chaos. But it's not like they're setting off a bomb or firing a missile into some city or town. This is one of the cards that they most likely would play, is the satellite card. At least attacking certain ones or denying our satellite systems, like General Saltzman is saying that the Space Force is working on right now, their own denial systems for foreign satellites, they probably have already been working on that and probably already have that right now. Okay, so they might activate their denial system as well too of our own satellites, which our entire military is dependent on, right? All of the targeting systems for missiles, drones, anything like that is dependent on satellites and GPS targeting. The whole war in Ukraine right now is dependent on satellites, okay? Specifically, SpaceX satellites and Starlink satellites are the backbone of the Ukrainian forces right now for their drone operations and missile targeting. So if they were able to take that out, it would be a huge hit for the United States. And China's also been launching, quote, quantum satellites as well too recently, which are smaller satellites, but they're more highly encrypted. They are more secure. They're way quicker. They use lasers to communicate. All right. And they also can communicate from extremely far distances. They actually broke the record for sending a satellite signal for these quantum satellites that China sent up just last year. They broke the record for how far a signal was sent from a satellite to on the ground, right? And this has major implications for things like ICBMs and things like that too. The targeting and the communication, right? If they're that much quicker and they can communicate that much faster, those seconds all count, right? For readiness and alertness if there ever is an active war. Those seconds, if we're waiting for a satellite to make it around, all right, back around to get back in position so you can communicate with it again, and then China's over here and has a satellite that's, I think they said it was like 13,000 miles away. And it's sent a signal, which is insane because normally satellites have to be like directly over you to communicate, right? And they're only, like a few miles in the sky. So they're maybe like 10,000 feet away from you. I don't know, something like that. They're maybe like a few miles away from you, okay? That's my point normally when a satellite, I don't know exactly how, it depends on the satellite too. But it's only a few miles up, most likely. This satellite was 13,000 miles away, right? Because it was like orbiting super far away, like almost on the other side of the Earth, able to send communications on the ground. So this is a major advantage, right? For just speed, everything. When seconds matter during big wars, then that's going to make a huge difference, right? And the US has no quantum satellites at all right now. We also got this warning from him as well too, just how if they were able to destroy hundreds of satellites like SpaceX, Starlink satellites, they've been up for consideration and targeting for years now because it's a major threat to China and Russia, right? These satellites there's thousands of them, I believe. If you look at the Starlink map, it will show all the satellites and exactly where they are, so you can see exactly where the orbits are for them to see if you're going to get the best coverage, things like that. They have a whole map for it. I've seen it before. And that's a huge threat for them. And they are making plans to take out these satellites. And if they did, then the physical side of it, right, the kinetic side, it wouldn't just be like, oh, the internet's wiped out, GPS is wiped out. It would create so much debris, even just destroying one, right? This commander was talking about how in 2007, China destroyed a satellite. I can't remember the name of it. And they're still dealing with space debris from it at the International Space Station, however many years later now, right? From 2007. 18 years later, they're still dealing with debris. This was just one satellite. It was a big satellite, but this was just one satellite. It's still just flying around. It causes problems. There's like certain orbits that satellites can't operate in now because there's just too much debris in the way, and it'll just run into it. So this is going to create entire like sections of the atmosphere and the stratosphere where you cannot operate satellites, right? And it's going to create dust, debris, going to be breathing this stuff in, and that stuff could be crashing, and it could just be like there's some type of name for this. I can't remember off the top of my head, where they're worried that the Earth's magnetic field is weakening. It's called the South Atlantic anomaly, where the Earth's magnetic field in the Atlantic Ocean is weakening, and it's been weakening pretty rapidly over the past few decades. It's been accelerating. And there's a dead zone where satellites cannot really operate in this area because the electromagnetic radiation from the sun is too great, and it interferes with the electronics and essentially fries them. It's essentially like an EMP from the sun frying these satellites. And they're worried if this South Atlantic anomaly expands, then this could cause an even bigger dead zone, and it's going to be almost unavoidable with Earth's orbit. You're almost all satellites are going to have to orbit through it, at least a lot of them in the southern hemisphere. And once they pass through here, it could just cause a like cascading effect where there's a bunch of satellites that are offline, they're getting out of orbit, they all start crashing into each other, and then they create their own magnetic field, because a lot of the material in these satellites is magnetic. And they're worried if there's enough space debris. This is a problem with these satellites, and I use satellite internet, but this is a major issue, is that once they become space junk, they're worried that it could become like a giant conglomerate, like almost like those, like you see the trash in the ocean, like a giant just island of trash. Imagine that, like an island of junk, space junk, magnetic space junk in the sky, floating around, right? And it's like pulling on the Earth and interfering with the Earth's magnetic field. That's what they're worried about, if there's enough of the space junk. That's also another major concern that they have, right? And this general was even talking about it. I can't find the exact clip of where he was saying that, but he was talking about that yesterday on Thursday, right? I want you to listen to him really quick too. He's just talking about all the things that satellites are critical for and how they could be affected. Listen to this really quick.
Over to you.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Kuyken, Commissioner Sims, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, to all the members of the Commission. Thank you for inviting me to testify today. The space domain plays an increasingly vital role in making the modern American way of life possible. China's pursuit of its ambitions in the domain could present a powerful destabilizing force to our economy and our national security. Today, more than half of the 16 sectors of critical national infrastructure depend on satellites. A third of our crops are grown using weather data from space. Internet and cellular service relies on satellites for optimization and resiliency. Modern transportation and logistics would be impossible without the global positioning system, and the timing signal it provides serves as the basis for digital finance and e-commerce transactions. Undoubtedly, space underpins our nation's economic prosperity, but it also provides the backbone for our national security. Today's joint force is built and sized around the assumption that space will be there when needed. Setting aside the obvious examples, many of our most important weapons depend on GPS guidance to hit their targets. And the rapid collection and flow of data from space is the basis for the way we mass and maneuver fires in support of battlefield objectives. Simply put, space matters more and more every single day, and a significant amount of our capability is built, sustained, and operated by the U.S. Space Force.
All right, so you heard him there. I just wanted you guys to hear him confirming that this affects everything. This affects everything, even the stock market, right, is affected by this. Everything is affected by satellite use. And even if just a portion of these satellites go offline, we could see major congestion and slowdowns of these networks and these systems that depend on these satellites. Also, I found the clip here of him talking about how the space debris could cause a major issue, right? And how China has already contributed to space debris recklessly over the last few decades. Listen to General Saltzman really quick.
Are we trying to counter a low Earth orbit capability? Are we looking at a geosynchronous capability? Those would require different kinds of weapons. And are we trying to deny, disrupt, degrade, or God forbid, destroy? What is the end effect that's really necessary? And I'll just conclude by saying we believe in responsible counter space. Destroying something on orbit, as we've seen with the Chinese in 2007 and the Russians in 2021, the debris that's generated by a destructive force on orbit can be catastrophic for all of the users of the space domain. And so that is I feel, the last resort, and something that we don't want to create this long-lasting hazardous debris field that can start to make the domain far less sustainable.
So you said China is...
All right, so you heard that there. He's talking about how these debris fields from these attacks and just recklessness, carelessness can destroy our space forces as well too, and our satellites. So let me know what you guys think down below, right? Big warning by this general. Please hit it up for me down there. I appreciate that. It just helps to get these alerts out so people know. Just make sure you are stocked up. Make sure you have some canned goods, some water, some gas cans, maybe a generator, right? Just in case you need it. And I wouldn't panic about this warning, but I would take it serious, right? And I would just be prepared and be psychologically prepared too, right? I've been for a few years knowing that satellite internet is at risk, right? I know they've been developing these weapons for a few years now, especially, and it's reaching a tipping point. I think they're going to potentially use it if they make a move on Taiwan, which they really want to do, and they've been wargaming and preparing for at least 5 to 10 years actively and readily. So thank you guys. I hope you guys have big blessings for your life, your family, and I hope you have a big old blessed day.